one of the questions I got from one of the listeners was, what would be the worst experience you ever had in prison? I think now's a pertinent time to ask that. You know, in that time when you're at Fulham or custody, you know, or you're in the remand center, what was probably one or two of the worst things you either saw, were a part of, heard from any of them?
I'll tell you, one of them. At one stage, they put me in the psych ward for a very short period of time, and it is pretty much a padded cell with a TV behind a big fiberglass wall, and you are in a thick apron like a doona, and you're nude, and your food comes all chopped up in little pieces, and I don't know what food that was. The TV would be playing in the background, and it was on music videos, and the music videos would just dredge up old memories, MTV, which made it even worse. That was pretty bad. The first initial feeling like that you're locked up, knowing that you cannot get out of that cage, that was also pretty bad. Every time you were being transported or had a visitor, actually having to bend over and spread your ass cheeks, that was pretty bad too. So a couple of bad things I saw. I saw a couple of young guys really get picked on by some pretty senior guys, and you don't actually have the power to do or say anything. You just have to shut your mouth and pretend you don't see anything. And I also saw a guy get a few holes put in him because he owed a debt for cigarettes.
That was in prison. Did you see much getting knives, weapons, drugs into prison? Was there any of that?
There are plenty of drugs. Plenty of drugs. Drugs are very easy accessible in prison, and if it's not if it's not illegal, they seem to dope you up on as many legal ones as possible to keep everybody calm in the house. Did not see a lot of violence. Pretty much kept to myself. Didn't roll in any circles. Just really looked after myself. And the biggest thing that drove me crazy in jail was listening to bullshit talk. I met a lot of people in jail. I met a lot of good guys, a lot of fathers who just wanted to see their kids. I met guys who were there on traffic infringements, and I met a lot of people who should never be released because they are just a menace to society and themselves. So it was a great learning experience for me. I took the opportunity whilst I was in prison to do as many programs and courses as I could to better myself. But those programs and courses aren't easy to get into. You can't just rock up and do a program. You need to book in. You need to have been there for a certain amount of time. They're quite hard to get into, but those programs helped me a lot whilst I was in jail.
Yeah, and so another question from one of the listeners, Angus Eyes, asked, was there any corruption at the time when you're in the prison system too, like the correctional services, but also when you were dealing drugs?
There is plenty of corruption out there. I've got to be careful what I say so I don't end up in trouble or get people into trouble. But let me tell you that at the time, I was dealing drugs to a police officer. If you read my book called Breaking Good, it goes into detail about the police officer. I was dealing drugs to DHS workers, people that work for council, nurses, teachers. There is plenty of corruption. And as for prison, that is the same thing as well. Plenty of drugs come into jail. It is not normally the prisoners who bring the drugs in. Drugs and tobacco. Tobacco has just as much as a currency in there as money.
Yeah, right. As I see, one of the things that I know is in the States, obviously, like those privately run prisons, they tend to be the biggest issue in terms of drugs and weaponry coming into prison. What was Fulham?
Fulham's a privatised prison.
So that's potentially one of the reasons why there was so much drugs and.
Oh, look, it wasn't rife, right? Drugs are in every prison, and now I'm in this role. I see it. I meet guys who have been to all different sorts of prisons. Um, drugs get into prisons. Was Fulham worse than any other prison? I don't think so. I'll tell you one thing about Fulham is it actually because it's in the country, it's in the Gippsland area. It gives you the opportunity to rehabilitate yourself because it's quite a calming prison. I think Fulham's one of the better prisons out there actually. The remand centre was a different kettle of fish. Maximum security, concrete walls, everybody detoxing, everybody at war with each other, codes getting, codes going off every half an hour. There's alarms and sirens and lockdowns. Now that's a different kettle of fish.